Well, welcome. Tonight, I guess I'm confused. Do we call him our honorable state representative or our honorable barrister of Milford? But let's start with an introduction.
Al, nice to see you. Brian Murray, State Representative for Milford, Hopedale, and Mendon. And also, as you've referenced, now Town Council in Milford, serving on a part-time basis while I'm with the state.
How do you do that? You got a thriving practice, you've got a House of Representatives seat, and now you're going to be helping out the town.
Well, I'm closing my private practice. So, really the full-time job that I have is with the legislature. And we did a part-time contract with the town, 19 hours a week, no benefits. I'm able to do that, I think, for the town because we still have former town council, Jerry Moody, still on board as a consulting basis. So essentially, you have two part-time positions, working that job right now.
Well, that sounds like a great deal for us
Yeah,
because you're getting the experience and all, and you're not paying $20,000 extra in benefits.
yeah, it was a unique opportunity that got presented to me. When the position opened, there were a number of people that, suggested that it would be something that would be, good for the town from my perspective. It wasn't something that, I was looking for or really wanted to do. But the more I thought about it, with the background that I have, I think that I can help the town out. So we had some discussions and came up with the idea of offering on a part-time, no benefits at all. And Jerry is still on board. So together, we're
Well, I
doing
love the idea of having you and Jerry because you got the history. You've lived through most of the recent, decades old issues, and you're dedicated to Milford.
Well, thank you. That was, I think, one of the attractions that the select board had, because I really can kind of hit the ground running, and a lot of the issues that the town is dealing with, I've got a pretty good background on. Obviously, maybe not what happened in the last year or two, a couple of years, but I mean the issues themselves, pretty familiar with. So. I think I've been able to help out, I think pretty well. It seems to be working.
Are you bringing
well.
your files with you?
There are a number of files that I have that the town has, over the last, 5 to 6 years, I get calls on occasion to look up things because records, seem to, have a way of disappearing sometimes. But I have a lot of records from the town for the work I did from the different projects, and then when I was on the select board. And believe it or not, I kept those files active as a representative because things would pop up with the railroad and other things like that, which I would build off of. And I'm still using them, and they're still of good value.
Well, I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but Tom O'Laughlin was funny when he said, I don't even go look in town hall for files anymore. I just call Brian because he's got the best filing system around.
Yes, I've done that for a number of town officials, the highway surveyor. I mean, I get requests, and I think it's important to maintain records, and the history on projects is very, very important. And I'm fortunate to have a lot of that history, and I think it'll benefit the town, no question.
Well, we'll get back to that, but you just started a new session?
We did.
Now, when they say they vote in the rules,
Yes.
aren't the rules kind of consistent year to year, or?
Well, you need to understand how the legislature works. So as you know, there's elections every 2 years. So you have a turnover. Every 2 years is when the legislative session starts. So essentially, we ended our last legislative session I say December 31st, but I think technically it went till, I say January 2nd or January 3rd, whatever that day was, until the new session got sworn in. And I think that was January 4th, I'm not sure. So once the new session gets sworn in, everything that was done the prior 2 years is gone. So if bills didn't get passed, they just died, and they have to be refiled in this new session. Whatever rules were in place during the previous 2 years, those are gone. So now you have to enact different rules.
But what kind of rules, Brian?
Well, these are the type of rules that regulate our formal sessions. So when we meet in the chamber, what's going to be considered, the time frame that we have to consider bills or amendments, how debate is carried on. The major focus, of course, through the rule change that we had previously, was to allow the remote participation of legislators in formal session because of the COVID situation. And we were kind of unique in that. Massachusetts, throughout the country, not many legislatures did that. In fact, many legislatures closed up shop and stopped working. In Massachusetts, we were one of the few, if maybe the only, legislatures to continue working throughout the COVID crisis, and we passed a number of laws, did a lot of things. Relief to businesses, relief to people. All of that got done.
Extra help to towns like Milford?
We did part of the budget, sure. I mean, and all of that got done because we stayed active and we were able to do it remotely. So we had sessions where I was home in my chair. We did it by telephone, and we'd be voting on bills over the telephone.
That sounds strange, because Massachusetts, I know it seems like a long distance, 100 miles end to end, but the square states where you go, like, you got family in Texas that they talk about driving 8 hours and still being in the same state.
Yeah.
So I would have thought the remote would have caught on to all the mid
Yeah,
states.
and a lot of the legislatures are part-time. So, I don't know exactly how Texas works, but a lot of the states, they'll have a certain time period. Like, okay, you're going to come in from February to April, and, that's when we pass laws, and that's when it gets done. But Massachusetts is full-time throughout the year. So with the recent rules package that we voted on yesterday, we're no longer going to have the remote option for our formal legislative sessions. So we have to go in person now to formally vote, which I think is great. I really did miss being in the chamber during the vote, because you have downtime, and that's the time when you can get to know the folks you work with, but also learn about these bills and get information, and it's really a good learning experience to be in that
I would think
environment.
for freshmen especially. I mean, when you talked about being in a bullpen and
Yeah,
how close you got relationship wise,
yeah.
and those relationships carry forward years.
Absolutely. And I felt bad, because the COVID class, I mean, they didn't get that. The legislators that came in during COVID was really kind of herky-jerky, and, they're just kind of getting their feet on the ground, and we get to know them now. So this new class that came in, and there's about, I think, a good 20 to 25 new representatives. So it's a fairly large class. And the COVID class, I think, was close to 20. So there's been a fairly good degree of turnover in the 160, seat House of Representatives in the last two cycles. But now, we're not going to have the remote access for our formal sessions. However, we have adopted remote access and participation at all public hearings. So I think that's a great a way to handle things. The public hearings, as you know, that's done by individual committees. So, for example, the Committee on Ways and Means or the Committee on Municipalities and County Government, the bills that get assigned to that committee when they have hearings, before you would have to go in person. So if you don't want to drive from Pittsfield, to go into Boston at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday or 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, because the hearings get scheduled at all different times.
Or Milford to Boston at 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's not fun. It's not fun. That time is not. That's the downside. But so now the public hearings, which encompasses all of the bills, and there's probably about 7,000 bills that have been filed in this session, which is typical for a legislative session. Yeah, that's a lot. So the public hearings, if folks want to testify for or against a bill, they'll be able to do it remotely, which I think is a great benefit.
Now, there's always, not always, but a large amount of confusion over why some committees or subcommittees have remote participation and some don't in Milford. Is it the same at the state level?
No, prior to COVID, there was no remote option. You had no remote option. It was just COVID that opened up the remote option, and the hearings were all remote. And then, as COVID subsided, different committees were having either in-person or offering a remote access. So now the rules are being formalized so that public hearings will have both. They'll have a choice of public in-person participation, or the person could choose a remote participation.
Who decides?
Well, the chair of the committee sets the hearing, and the chair is required to be in person. The committees will all have a remote option.
Selected by the chairman. So it's like Milford. 'Cause
Yeah.
I was told for the FinCom, I have the option of allowing remote or not allowing remote.
Well, there's no option for our public hearings now. There will be a remote option and an in-person option, just for the hearings.
I've always gone with the remote option just because you do have people who have a hard time getting to Milford Town Hall.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think we need to, embrace the technology we have. I think COVID certainly accelerated that use because, I think I remember hearing about Zoom, prior to COVID, and then once COVID came, it became like second nature, Teams, Zoom, all of those platforms. So, now the question is, how do we best utilize it to increase participation and get information out to folks in the Commonwealth?
And I'm comfortable, like the FinCom would be considered a major committee in town. The Select Board, you've got committees like that, or if there was very controversial articles being considered, I'm comfortable with offering the Zoom option or Teams, whatever it is. I'm not sure that mandating every meeting I'm comfortable with yet.
Well, that's going to be, I think, the battleground of discussion in this session, because I think there are more than a few bills that address that, and there's a major bill, and I think the way the bill is set up now, it would be a requirement to have a remote option at all meetings of public bodies, of which these groups that you mentioned would be. Now, that was similar to a bill that we passed in the House last session that did not get passed in the Senate because there was a large degree of opposition from the Mass Municipal Association. I think for some of the reasons that you're talking about, number one, there are a lot of communities that are smaller than Milford that don't have the resources that we have to be able to do it. And then number two, some of these committees, subcommittees, like you've talked about, does that, warrant, the kind of investment?
We'd have to add another person.
Exactly.
I mean, I think of the FinCom. There's 15 of us. There's probably 8, 9 subcommittees or a subcommittee of the subcommittee. That's a lot of hours. So I'm not sure. I'm
It
not saying
really
I'm
is.
against it, because in theory, I like the idea.
Yeah,
More participation is better.
right.
But I look and I say some of the little general government quick meetings that we've had as subcommittee, I don't know that it's worth having a remote option.
Or even a partial, or I shouldn't say a partial, an ad hoc committee, a committee that's set up for a specific purpose. And I think back to, some of the committees that I was a part of, with the youth center, the high school, the senior center. When you're in the midst of a building project, I mean, sometimes you have to have meetings at, a moment's notice to deal with a particular issue that comes up in the field. And I know that we met at a lot of irregular times back then, which in today's world, I think would be hampered if you had to also really, offer that remote access. So it's going to be interesting to see how that bill shakes out. Like I said, the Mass Municipal Association, their preference would be to at least allow it to have a local option so that the town could decide whether or not they want to do it. This bill does provide a financial component, which it did not last session, so that might change the landscape a little bit in terms of, we talked about adding a person, so now, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to, shake out, but there is a financial component that would at least address that for some communities. I don't know if there's going to be a showing of need, if it's going to depend on, the community's assets or whatever, but that's a new piece that's put into this bill.
Yeah, I was thinking, because we've got 2 IT, now 3 IT people.
Yeah, and they're busy.
We could keep them real busy if they had to attend every subcommittee meeting of every committee.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, in theory, I like the idea of making it easier for people to participate.
Yeah. So that's essentially really how the legislature works on a particular bill. So the bill gets filed, right? And I signed on to that bill because, I do support it, and I think it's an important piece to go forward. However, as that bill goes through the committee process, different stakeholders will come forward and voice the concerns that we've talked about. And as it goes through, probably municipalities, maybe Ways and Means, I'm not sure where else it might go, it can be changed, it can be amended, to address some of these issues. And it may come out on the other end looking entirely different than it did on the
When it
front end.
started.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I think the key is on that is, do you support the concept? And if you do, then you should support the bill and then try to work through some of the problem areas.
So now, you mentioned 7,000 bills get
Yeah.
filed?
Sure, yeah, that's been pretty consistent since I've been in the legislature. Every year it's about 7,000 bills.
There's only 160 people?
Representatives of 40 senators, yeah.
So 200 altogether.
Yes,
And between them, they come up with 7,000.
yeah.
How do you have time to even read them?
Well, I mean, actually, right now, all representatives and senators are sending out their emails with their list of bills, right? So, in fact, that's my goal to get done this week, which we're losing
I was
time
going
on
to say, you
this
don't got a
week.
lot of time.
Yeah, so that'll go out next week. I think my list is about 10 or 12. Some, have filed, 25 to 30. Some have filed 5 or 6, so it's different. So when you circulate the emails, and I read my colleagues' emails, they give you a summary of the bill. Do you know what I mean? So you
Yeah,
get a sense
kind
as
of
to
an
what.
abstract.
Yeah, give you an abstract of the bill, and sometimes the summary is all you need. I don't think that's something I want to get involved with. Or, that looks really, really good. I think I'd like to jump on that. But lots of times it's like, well, okay, I understand the summary. Let me go to the bill and read the bill. So that's kind of the process you do. So that's work that you're doing constantly, I mean, right before I came here, I was going through a number of emails and targeting these bills. It's stuff that you do in the morning, it's stuff you do at night, so you go through them. So it's not that you have to read all 7,000, but you get a sense as to what gets presented to you. you have a sense as to what you think is something you could support. You get a sense as to something that, you don't really think is very
Is
good.
that something you can, I hate to say delegate, but have office staff do screens for you?
Well, first of all, I only have a single legislative aide, and she's a young lady, and she's very good, and, she does, certain things for me. But that kind of stuff is something you got to do yourself, I think. I mean, and I also respond to every email I get from a constituent. Some,
Really? You
I,
do it yourself?
I do it myself. I read every email and I respond to every email. That's, not all legislators do that. But I think that's important to do, and that's what I do.
Now, you've got one aide.
Yeah.
How does that, do most representatives have one, or do some have more?
Most have one, some have two, Um, I think the difference is some legislators don't handle the constituent work themselves, and they would delegate it, like you say. My aide is not from the area, and I purposely got someone central into Boston because I really just need her to focus on stuff going on in the State House. Different lobbyists that come in if they want to meet, and circulating that stuff. The stuff back home is my job, and that's what I take care of. So I don't need I don't want somebody from my area because if Al Correa writes to me or something or calls me, I want to talk to you. I don't want to have my aide talk to you.
Well, I mean, that feels better.
Yeah.
Because certainly, I don't want to be mean, but if I have an issue, I don't want to be given somebody from Nebraska to talk to. 'Cause
Yeah,
what do
no.
they know about Milford?
Yeah, well, that's true. And to be honest with you, and I don't even know if I should say this, so if you have an unemployment issue, and I reach out to you, directly and get the information, and then I reach directly to unemployment as opposed to my legislative aide, the action's quicker.
Now, the title
The
carries some
action's
weight.
quicker. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. So, if you're talking about, Registry of Motor Vehicles, Department of Revenue, I mean, all of these state agencies. So when people reach out to me, I don't have my aide, follow up on that. I do it myself.
I can see where that makes a difference. Plus, it makes me feel better.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I hate to be cold, but I'm paying your salary.
Yeah.
I want some
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah. So that's the job. So that's how I do it. But going through the bills, I mean, again, that's the job, and you just do it.
Do you keep an aide for a long time, or is it a cycle?
I've had two. When I first got elected, I hired a young lady, and she was excellent and wonderful kid, but nice person. And she went off and got a better job because, quite frankly, they don't get paid a whole lot. And then I hired this young lady. Actually, it was right before COVID. So I hired her like in February of 20, right? Yeah, that's when it was, February 20. And then the world ended in March of 20, right? So it was kind of tough. We really didn't get a lot of time to
It's
work
always
together.
hard. Like, you get an aide, we get interns. You go and you interview them, and you find these fantastic interns, and they last a year or two, and then you've realized if you really care about them, you want them to move on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But wait a minute, he or she now knows exactly what I want.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I haven't had any interns really since COVID. We used to have interns. My aide would get some kids from colleges or whatever, and we had them in and we'd have them do some things. But, to be honest with you, after half a day, I said, go check out the State House, man. I mean, this is where you want to be. There's stuff going on in this room. There's stuff going on. Just go and soak in the atmosphere. This is what it's about. So it was really exciting to see young kids, they come back. I say, what'd you see, And, we went to this hearing. Oh, we did this, so, and I really got a kick out of, just, how they enjoyed the State House. It's changed since COVID, and I didn't take on any interns, during COVID. Because because I think a big part of the experience was for them to be at the State House.
Yeah, and being locked away doesn't kind of do it.
No, I didn't really feel the need to do that.
So now I'll be mean. How's the budget? I hate to say it, but
Well, we just had the revenue projections, and I think they're positive, but I don't think they're going to be as positive as they were this past fiscal year when money had to come back because too much was collected. But I think that the revenue is going to be fine. I think this fiscal year we're running above projections. We've been able to put away the most in the state stabilization fund than has ever been done in the history of the Commonwealth. It's up to about, I think, $6-7 billion, and I think when I got in, it was under $2. So we've been able to put money away, and then also pay for a number of programs, but there's a lot of asks. There's a lot of asks, and like we talked about earlier, one of them is the school lunches. So we were able to fully fund school lunches for all students using federal money. And when that federal money stopped in this fiscal year, we stepped forward and did a supplemental budget and paid for the rest of it. So that's going to take us to the end of June 2023.
but then what?
So now a big question is for FY24, is it going to be funded? So there's legislation supporting that, which I've jumped on to support, and that'll come up in budget discussions also.
Yeah, I don't think people really appreciate Mother Carla and what
Oh my goodness, we
you start thinking about how many kids don't get good meals at home. And, having a Carla meal prepared for you. Because if anything, if I know Carla Tuttle's cooking it, I'm not worried about the quality or the quantity.
Oh, we are so lucky in Milford. I don't know that people realize it because, unfortunately, other towns, other school districts, they don't have that. And, what I'm hearing is a lot of the processed food, the easy stuff, and, that's not what you get here, So we're very lucky, to have Carla in Milford and her staff. They've just done a great job for the longest time.
Well, it's like any place. It starts from the top.
Yeah.
It's always the chief that sets the environment and the attitude.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But you start thinking about, I was stunned when I found out that half the kids at Milford High qualified
Oh, sure.
for free lunch.
Yep.
And I can't remember the exact numbers, but to qualify, you had to be making less than like $36,000 for a family of four.
Yeah, it's on that federal poverty guideline, and that's kind of the ballpark you're in. Milford, the demographics in Milford, the school district, it's a challenging district, and there's a lot of kids that have a lot of needs, and we've talked about this before, and I'm biased, but I kind of think our school district does a pretty darn good job with a very difficult set of circumstances.
Well, I've always said we can be biased, but the ultimate judges are the colleges.
Yes.
You look at your daughter, your son, they got in.
Yeah.
They got into good schools.
Yeah.
My daughters got into the schools they wanted.
Yeah.
To me, that's the ultimate report card for our school system.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We can complain and say we don't have this, we don't have that, but to me, McIntyre's job is to get my kids ready to get into the top schools and thrive in the top schools. Now, a year ago, you kept my heart going when the school came to us and said, we've added 250 kids and we need $6 million incremental funding. For a while, we were like, where the heck? And then somehow you got that Child Act through.
Yeah, student opportunity. Yeah, that was a major piece of legislation. And that's another, budget ask that, the governor's, she's committed to fully funding it, which is great. And that act, the way the allocation of benefits goes out under that act, Milford is prime, is right in the sweet spot to really,
Well,
get the
my
full benefits
understanding
from it.
was you selected towns that had high special needs,
Yep,
high immigrant population,
yeah, English language
English
learners.
learners,
Yeah,
and a high low-income bracket.
correct,
We hit all three.
correct, correct.
I mean, that was a night where I had an extra cup of coffee to celebrate 7 million extra dollars coming our way.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think that the school budget, I think, local aid. We obviously we don't know what the numbers are going to be projected at, but I would think that they would be similar and better than last year.
Oh, that would be heaven.
Yeah, I would think so.
I mean, for the longest time, I used to bust Bob Trombley's backside about why do you need more geography? When we built the high school, we had 220 kids. 222 graduated in 74.
Yeah.
40 years later, we got 264.
Yeah.
That's one kid per year. And then the last few years, when they talk about 200, 250 new kids a year,
Yeah.
that's a new memorial school every year and a half.
Yep. Yep. And as you know, there's the modulars coming in on Brookside, which, that's just the reality of what the district is facing. Someone call.
Your job is never done.
It's never done. Never done.
But if
It'll
we
be
even
okay.
come close to the last year or two, that will make a huge difference.
Oh, sure. Sure. Yep.
Because for the longest time, we've been saying Milford, in comparison to a couple of towns around us, which have a more homogeneous population, not of the three target areas, we had extra demands.
Yeah, and I can just say the other schools in my district, Hopedale and Mendon Upton, I mean, they, unfortunately did not get the level of benefits that we got in Milford from that Student Opportunity Act.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. I mean, Hopedale has, what, a fourth the size of our class?
Oh, yeah. It's a much smaller school, but, they have a great program over there, and they do a lot of creative things. And Mendon Upton is a very good school as well. So, I mean, I don't know, again, I'm a little biased, but, I kind of think that the schools we have in this particular district are excellent.
Again, all over the area. When I talk to my wife's family down in Texas, and they tell me the challenges their school systems are dealing
sure.
with,
Yeah.
I sit there and I say, I can't say this publicly, I guess I just did, but
Yeah.
in comparison,
Yeah.
we're in heaven. You look and say what we're offering our students,
Yeah.
it's not 30-some kids per class, it's not limited resources.
Right.
And you were there, it starts with town meeting.
Sure.
I remember walking into the high school to the C Wing science section saying, hey, this is cool. This looks just like when I was here 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And the town rallied around
Yeah.
that image and came up with $500,000 to supplement the equipment for biotech and technology learning in the science wing. I mean, not every town could or would do that.
No, but it's a constant challenge, and as you know now, I think the big thing on the horizon is going to be a renovation or a revitalization of that Milford High School building, and that's going to be a major topic for the town. I think the school department, if they have not done already, they're working on getting their statement of interest in again. With SBA and try to get that process going.
And I can see that we're at a disadvantage. We just got Woodland,
Yeah.
and there's 300 and some odd towns around us that need help as much as we do. But we've put away the $1.5 million.
Yep.
tucked it away so that the day the SBA says go, we can go to town meeting. And you know, it's always easier to ask for permission to spend money that you don't have to ask for.
Right. Right.
We've
Right.
already tucked it away.
Right.
We just want to use it.
Right. Just going to transfer from bucket A to bucket B. Yeah. So that's where it's at.
So what do you see as the big challenge coming up in this session?
You know, I think one of the focuses is going to be, I think, on tax relief. You know, that kind of ended in suspension at the end of the session because we, you know, had targeted a number of areas to provide tax relief. And then the whole Chapter 62F came into play where money came back to the taxpayers because of the level of collections was so much
But we
higher
did
than
get
the
tax
budget.
relief.
You did get tax relief,
Right
yeah.
pocket, not the left pocket that you were going to put it in.
Yeah, yeah,
But we got money back.
yeah. So now, you know, the governor has proposed, you know, she's indicated that she's very, very interested in it. You know, I think, you know, taking a look at it, you know, the federal ARPA money has stopped, so that's going to be a different kind of picture that's going to be put. I think the economy is going to be cooling a bit. I don't know if the revenue numbers are going to be what they were. So it's going to be interesting to see what gets put together. There's a number of bills proposed, you know, to target tax relief in many, many different fashions. So that's going to be a major topic. I think the other, well, a couple of issues really is the workforce shortages in the healthcare industry and also the human services industry. You know, your nursing homes, your adult day care centers, your hospitals. They've got some real shortages. They've got some infrastructure problems. So that's going to be an area where I think there's going to be looking for some assistance and some help. And childcare. Childcare, I think, is at the top, if not the top of the list of things that need to be addressed. There's childcare shortages, which leads to so many other things. It makes it difficult for parents to get out and work. So it's kind of a circular type thing. So that's another area that I think there's going to be some major legislation.
I've always been amazed. We had 3 against 2. 'Cause my sainted mother lived with us.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So we had 3 adults chasing after 2 kids. And you had 2. You know what the challenge is.
We had 3.
Oh, that's right. I
Yeah,
keep forgetting about little freckle nose.
Yeah. So we were into zone defense.
Yeah, you were. The odds were the other way on you.
Yeah.
But when I see what these single moms and single dads have to do, I am amazed.
Even you know, 2-parent families. I mean, it's very difficult. Just about every family has to have 2 incomes, so it makes it extremely difficult to care for kids. And you know, child care centers have closed. There's less than there were before COVID. It's tougher and tougher for them to operate. It's tougher and tougher for them to find staff. The costs are astronomical. So, you know, there's going to have to be some relief at both ends of the spectrum. And hopefully, you know, that will free up, you know, some folks to maybe address some of the workforce issues. Because employers are having a very difficult time trying to find folks to work for them.
Well, I remember when the big push was moving minimum wage to $15.
Yes, yeah.
That was the goal. And
Yep.
now I look in the window. I mean, the other night I couldn't get a cup of coffee because they didn't have enough people to keep the donut shop open.
Right.
And then when you see they're starting people at $14, $15 an hour,
Yeah, yeah.
which I think is great, but it's got to cut in to their profits. Or like we had a family living with us, and their son was making $20 an hour part-time at Amazon.
Yeah, sure.
I thought that was wonderful for him.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's $40-some thousand a year for somebody just out of high school.
Right, right.
But you turn around and say, is it sustainable?
Yeah. And of course, Amazon, as you know, went through a huge layoff. They just laid off about 18,000 people across the country. So, that industry is adjusting and changing. Um, it seems like change happens so fast now. Before it was kind of a gradual type, shifting in an economy or a certain business area. And now it seems to happen, a lot more suddenly.
Well, when you start talking about having to save tens of millions of dollars, you can't wait too long.
That's right,
But
yeah.
affecting, when they say they're going to lay off 17,000,
Mm.
that's affecting 40,000 people.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because you figure, like you said, especially in New England, to survive, you almost need two incomes. So you take one away and you're really putting a hurt on the family.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what's going on, and it's going to be interesting to see. This is going to be a new administration, for me to work with. I found the Baker administration to be, by and large, pretty good to deal with. They, were very responsive, when you had to reach out to them. And I'm sure, Governor Healy will once she gets her team into place. But that's a degree of change and turnover, and that's going to take some adjusting, to see what their priorities are and how they want to handle things.
Millionaire's tax.
Yeah, well, we like
Is
to
it
call it the Fair Share Amendment,
whatever you
Yeah. Which was voted in by the voters.
But is it going to work? Is it working? Is the money going to schools and roads?
Well, it hasn't been collected yet. I mean, it'd be part of the tax return when people file their taxes. So basically, what it is, it's a 4% surcharge on adjusted gross income over $1 million, and it's just on that money that's over the million, which is the 4%.
But it's substantial.
It's targeted to bring in excess, I think, of $1 to $2 billion, something like that. And I'm always kind of suspicious as how they come up with these targets and how they really, arrive at that particular number. I think it will be an increase to revenue. And of course, the amendment that was voted on by the voters mandates that money gets targeted to transportation and education,
But does it have to be incremental? I tell you what I worry about. School choice can only be spent on certain things. But I remember you could buy books with school choice money and then take the book money in your budget and go buy other things.
Well, that's the big question. So that's going to, really put the administration and the legislature to task to make sure that we're not backfilling it
Right.
and using the money for something else. Absolutely. The intention is for it to supplement existing budget expenditures in transportation and education, not supplant it
Right.
and allow that money to go elsewhere.
That's
That's absolutely true.
two things worried me.
Yeah.
One is that it could be shifting money and you don't feel the net. The second thing is like the AMT. Right now it's for rich people making more than $1 million. That was the alternate minimum tax years ago.
Oh,
And-
yeah.
And then slowly it crept. People, I always loved the definition of who's rich. That's somebody making $1 more than me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want to tax the rich as long as it's $1 over my income?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
But you worry about the creep that all of a sudden somebody says, hey, that worked. Maybe we should make it 750. Maybe we should make it 500,000.
Well, I mean, the thing to realize about that is it's a constitutional amendment. So that's not something that you could pass by law in the legislature. And it took at least 4 years to get it to this point. So if there were going to be any adjustments, you would have to go through that same process. It would have to the constitutional question would have to go through the legislature in 2 consecutive terms, okay, and then go to the voters, for approval. So it's not an easy process to change. I think it's pretty much, it is what it is. And, I really see plenty of need at both education and transportation, to really not even tempt to try to, reallocate, existing budgetary amounts. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of need both in education and transportation, and this money, while it sounds like a lot, $1 billion to $2 billion in the overall budget of 45 whatever $billion. I mean, it's not,
No,
that.
it's a couple percent, which is
Yeah.
significant, but
Yeah, but not enough
not
to.
a panacea to fix everything.
Exactly, exactly. So we're behind on a lot of transportation projects. So hopefully this will give us some resources to be able to address some of those across the state. And like I said, education, there's a number of areas, that Student Opportunity Act is requiring increased funding. And, I'm sure that, that's exactly where this funding is going to be used.
Well, I mean, the Opportunity Act really hit home here. And you start looking at whether you want to support immigration, legal, illegal, or not. Fact is, when 200 kids show up on your doorstep, you can't kick them out.
No,
You
no,
can't deport them to Rhode Island.
no, no,
They're ours.
yeah.
And you got to somehow manage them.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's what a lot of communities are facing. Milford, I think, tops on the list for sure.
Yeah, I could see towns around us saying, why did Milford get 7 million and we got crumbs? But for us, we've been living with crumbs per kid for too long.
Well, I mean, I think, and like when I talk to the officials in Hopedale and Mendon, for example, I mean, they fully understand, and I don't think they begrudge Milford at all. I think what their approach is, and myself and the legislators from the Blackstone Valley have advocated for, okay, student opportunity is great for those kinds of schools, but there are other schools too that have different kinds of needs, and we really need to try to focus some kind of funding towards those schools. And that was something that we tried working on last session, and I'm sure we'll try to do it again.
Well, there's been discussion. Love what's happened at BVT. The kids who are going are really doing well. Dr. Mike is fantastic. But I worry about the kids, and I've said it before, like my father. Put my father in an organic chemistry class. He's not academically inclined. He wouldn't do well. Give the man a tool. He was an artist. But to get into Blackstone now, you got to be in the top part of the class.
That's another issue. There's a shortage of vocational seats, I think that the waiting list is somewhere up over 600, every year for kids that want to get into voc placement. So, we need to increase those opportunities. There are, different kinds of programs that are developing to kind of supplement that. So, for example, the Blackstone Valley Chamber of Commerce, they've set up their own, education component so that they can take on some of the high school kids that don't get into BVT, and they can get a certification in a particular area with the equipment that they have there. And they also cater to adults as well. So I think these kind of, I don't say pop-up programs, but these kind of supplemental type programs need to grow until we can expand and open up more voc schools, because there is a lot of students that, like you say, that want to get into these programs. College is not really, what they're looking to do, but, they want to get into an area where they can get some job-ready skills getting out of high school, and that's another area where expansion is needed.
Well, I was amazed that my folks could pay for college for me. It was $6,200 a year when I graduated, but my mom was making $11,000 a year at Draper.
Yeah.
Dad was making the big bucks, $18,000 at General Motors.
Wow.
But you start thinking about that, and you say today, 65, 70,000 a year.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure I've been away from tuition for a few years, thankfully. Yeah, I'm sure it's up even higher than that, probably.
But you sit there and say, the age of just going to go to school.
Yeah,
Well, when you're graduating, I don't know how they do it.
yeah,
I mean, I was fortunate. My parents were able to scrape together $6,000 a year. I graduated. I got $32.80 to myself, but it was my $32.
yep, yep,
These kids today are graduating with $50,000, $100,000 debt.
yeah, yeah,
So, looking at alternatives, biotech operators that making $50,000 coming out of school. That's a good job.
it's excellent. It's excellent. That whole area of advanced manufacturing, biotech, I mean, that's always something that we're trying to incentivize in the state.
Well, what a driver for our economy,
Absolutely.
and clean, very respectable, very affluent jobs.
Yep.
And I don't know what you made when you first started, but
I remember.
I know it wasn't $50,000 for me.
Yeah, I don't even remember. It was not a lot. I know that. It was
My first salary
thing,
was
yeah.
$18,000. I was so proud I made as much as my father
Yeah, yeah.
at Waters.
Yep.
But
Waters, yeah.
again, 18,000 went a long way when you didn't have a mountain of debt on your back.
Yeah. No, Massachusetts, going back to Governor Patrick, has always made a big commitment, as you know, to the life sciences industry. And we just renewed that major bond. I think it was $500-600 million bond. I can't remember if that was last session or the prior session. But the commitment is there to really take on that Silicon Valley and keep these kinds of businesses, this industry, right here in Massachusetts.
Well, we take advantage of it every year in the biotech side,
Yeah.
where we're allowed 2 interns
Mm-hmm.
from Massachusetts, either have to be residents or full-time Massachusetts students.
Okay.
And we submit the bill at the end of the 12 weeks, and the state pays it.
Yeah.
So we're silly not to
Right.
take them on. And a couple years ago, they expanded it to you could have 2 community college interns as well. Well, what a great opportunity.
Yeah. And that's just, one example. So, yeah, so the state's made the commitment to that long before I got involved. And, it's definitely something that, I've supported since I've been in the legislature. And I think it's just a great investment on a lot of different levels.
One tough question. Will the transportation money make it outside of 128?
Boy, we hope so, huh? We hope so. You mean make it all the way out to Western Mass and
Oh,
Milford?
God. That had to be the most amazing comment when a candidate came on and said, I'm all over the state. I'm all the way Western Mass as far as Worcester. My friends who come from Springfield almost hacked up their lungs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, how that, can spread out. And of course, you've got some major transportation initiatives kind of in the pipeline, that east-west rail type thing from Boston to Springfield on the train, which I think would be a benefit to Worcester and our area as well. But, that's far away. Do you know what I mean? That's still in the
But that's
embryonic
a
stages.
game changer.
It really should be.
Because I remember when I first moved down to Washington, Gaithersburg, Frederick, Maryland was
Yeah.
considered out there.
Yeah.
Once they improved the transportation and the trains,
Yep.
there were people commuting to D.C. from West Virginia
Wow.
because they could take, it was an hour and a half train, but
Yep.
sit there, relax, read, do work.
It took me an hour and a half to come home from Boston last night. You know what I mean? So, yeah, and I mean, and that, kind of addresses your workforce shortage, your housing, affordable housing. That's another huge issue that we're facing in the Commonwealth, the lack of housing. Western Mass, you can build a house a lot less expensive than you can in the Metro West area. So you're right, it would be a game changer, again, on a lot of different levels.
But what can the legislature do to help affordable housing?
Well, we passed at the governor's request the housing reform bill, which, reduced the two-thirds zoning requirement for some projects, and there was a lot of optimism that was going to really kind of be a game changer. From my experience at the local level, that was so targeted and so precise that I really didn't see that as making
It's
much
not
of a
going to have broad
difference.
change.
And it really hasn't. So, I mean, to me, I think that if you want a developer to build affordable housing, you've got to incentivize that developer to do it. Why should he or she build a condominium, that if they just put in some, trim and accoutrements, they can sell at top rate and sell the same unit at a lower rate? I mean, there's just no incentive there. And, that's where I kind of diverge from the progressives, because it seems like they want to try to, penalize the developer, force them to do this, force them to do that. Economically, I don't see.
Has it ever worked to fight the market?
It really doesn't, So, I mean, I would support programs that are going to incentivize that kind of development to make it worthwhile for the developer to build those, and then, have the affordable component for people to get in there. That's going to be another issue.
Especially now. I saw a house on Whitewood Road going for $900,000.
I know.
Brian, when we were kids, you could have bought Milford for $900,000. They'd throw in Hopedale, maybe part of Mendon.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think prices are going to cool a little bit, but not a whole lot. And it's really difficult to buy right now. And Milford, again, I mean, we have a large stock of multifamily housing, more than a lot of communities. So, I don't really see this as kind of a Milford issue, but it's certainly a Commonwealth issue. It's certainly a national issue. And I think until, you learn to try to incentivize developers to build that kind of housing, it's not going to happen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Fighting the market, being the salmon swimming upstream, is not going to have the effect that you want.
So we'll see how it works out in Boston. Maya Wu's come on, and, that's a big part of her agenda, and she's attacking it by, making more requirements on the developers, forcing them to do the 20% affordable as opposed to the 15% in a project. Well, developers just won't do the project.
Right. Then you end up with no percent.
Exactly.
Well, we'll see what happens the next
will.
time we get together. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Good to
And
see
thank
you
you
as
for
always.
our $7 million that helped our school budget. As always, there's a lot of people behind the scenes. There's a lot of people in front of the scenes that help Milford. You've just heard from somebody who is both helping us locally now and as a state level. If you have questions, we encourage you, get to know the rep. As Brian said, he'll take it on himself. You won't get shuffled off to the 40th aide of the 30th intern. And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today. Good night, all.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just